Before we start the episode, wanted to share some tragic news. Brian Vasquez, the composer of our themes music and our interstitial music, as well as the theme for my show Take Line and for other Cricket properties like Dare We Say, passed away early this week with his friends and his family around him.
As you may know, Brian was diagnosed with leukemia in November. We mentioned it on the show at the time with a link to the GoFundMe supporting Brian's medical costs, which many of you kindly contributed to. And we're very grateful for that here on X-Ray.
We won't forget Brian's contributions to the show, his generosity, his amazing talent, his positive attitude, and of course through his music. He'll always be a part of the show. He's a joy to work with, as anyone who had the opportunity to collaborate with him can attest. Warning, this podcast contains spoilers for the first 4 episodes of The Bad Batch Season 2. Hello, my name is Jason Concepcion.
And I'm Rosie Knight.
And welcome to X-Ray Vision, the Crooked Media podcast, where we dive deep into your favorite shows, movies, comics, and pop culture.
In this episode, in the previously on, we're going to be talking about that VFX union that's simmering in Hollywood.
Let's go!
Let's go. It's time to happen. Some very interesting parallels with the comic book union struggles. We're going to be talking more about the AI art conversation with a very interesting and quite unexpected update in the Airlock. We're going to be catching up on the Bad Batch Season 2. I know our Discord is excited. It's going to be episodes 1 to 4. There's a lot of fun, weird stuff in there. And in the Nerd Out, Rodney pitches us on a secret invasion Skrull theory that I am actually shocked we hadn't already thought about. So we're going to be talking about this.
I think it's a good one. Okay, first up, as reported by Vulture, January 13th, 2023, story written by Chris Lee, VFX workers in the movie industry. I wanted to say Hollywood, but I think an important wrinkle in this story and the issues herein is that there's often no physical proximity of these workers to the places where these movies are made. They're all over the world. So essentially, these workers all across the globe are talking about forming a union. Here's a quote from the piece. Talk to any VFX artist or tech working in modern Hollywood, and certain complaints come up over and over again. The punishing deadlines, the grueling work hours, too few workers charged with too much work, underpayment, and systematic, quote, pixel fucking, an industry phrase used to describe the behavior of nitpicking clients who lack the VFX knowledge to communicate their needs. I think that last bit is an important part of this. This is an incredibly skill-based, tech-based, obviously, specialized field. And I think it seems like magic if you're not directly involved in creating this stuff. And I think it can be very easy to say, well, can't you just like make the fur move when you don't know what the hell you're talking about? And the end result of this is artists being put through the ringer to create stuff. And the MCU, Marvel, is front and center to this just because of the weight of the footprint that they have in the space.
Well, there are some really unbelievable... This whole article is just full of brilliant reporting, but there are some unbelievable numbers in this article about how, in the era of a kind of like a industrial lights and magic, like just post the original Star Wars, you're talking about like 10% of all movies that would have any kind of CG post-production. And now it's 90%. And not just that, but places like Marvel, which, this was something we spoke about this topic before in kind of summer last year when this massive amount of stories, Reddit threads, tweets came out about the way that Marvel had been treating people in post-production houses. And one of the biggest complaints that comes up against here is ironically comes from one of the best things that Marvel does, which is where they take an underrepresented or newer director who has maybe only made a few indie movies, Chloe Zhao, Taika, Ryan Coogler. And then there doesn't seem to be a good go-between between that director, the studio, and the VFX. So one of the things that they get into quite detailed here, which is just shocking, is this kind of having to rewrite the entire end of the movie a month before they're meant to be done. And then they're having to rebuild from scratch because a lot of times they'll just say, this happens instead. And then you have an artist who has to craft that entire thing. There is also a number in here, I believe, where, and this one is really painful when you think about how much money these movies make. I believe they said that they did a survey of payment of people who worked in these fields. And one of them, the lowest pay that they found was like $17.34 an hour, which is just absolutely nightmarish for these 18-hour days, you know, that you have to work to be able to finish this movie that is going to make $1 billion. So I'm really glad that there's kind of this voracious quest for unionization. But the thing that I find really interesting from reading this article that kind of blew my mind, I didn't really realize how similar the problem is. As you kind of very astutely pointed out, Jason, the lack of a physical space that all of these people work in. It's not a warehouse. It's not an office. There are 12, 15, 16, 18, 20 houses sometimes all around the world working on this. And the biggest similarity to comics, a lot of people who do this job are freelancers. It is incredibly hard to unionize as freelancers. That is what, for a long time, has kept comics so hard to unionize, because when you write a comic book for work for hire, you are not an employee. You may be an editor who is an employee who perhaps writes a story, but in general, you are hired work for hire. You are not an employee. You don't get benefits. You don't really have any employment rights. You are just hired for that one thing. And that is very much in the same scope as what the VFX space is struggling with. I'm very interested to see where this goes, because a lot of times all you need is the one place to do it. And that's something they talk about
Break
here.
the seal.
You know, we had talked about Image Comics unionizing, right? And how the inside the company workers had tried to start a union that was not voluntarily recognized. Very ironic. But this is the takeaway from this article that some people have in the piece is kind of that hopefully one house will unionize, one space, one company, the people within it will unionize. And then from there, that can be the start of a bigger union, which I think is what everyone hopes for comics too. Yeah, this was just such a great read. And I'm very interested. The wildest thing is, like, if there was a strike, and obviously it'll be like a wildcat strike because there's not a union, but like, if there was a strike, I mean, movies would just, the industry would come to a standstill.
I mean, the issue is, as you noted, is the kind of diffuse nature of the VFX industry, various houses, they're all around the world. How do you get them to strike as one? Because what would happen, you know, the threat is significantly lessened when a producer, a platform, whoever can just say, okay, well, you're not going to do it. I'm going to go over to this other place. Mm-hmm. And so that's why these issues are very important. And it's also an outgrowth. I see this as very related to the issue of crunch in video game, the video game space. Crunch being the kind of like culturally accepted portion of the production schedule of a video game, during which it is expected that employees essentially live at the fucking office and kill themselves to make this game go gold. Now, significant difference being oftentimes with crunch and with video game production, you do have employees all in the same place. And there is, I think, contra the Hollywood and television, there is, from the leadership in video games, a keen understanding of the work and the type of work that goes into creating the game. So,
and I will also say there was a huge and very widespread movement by the game workers union to start a union that really did like spark off some change there. So that's kind of what I feel like could happen here. Hopefully,
I think in general, just this conversation is the fact that it's happening out in public, the fact that VFX workers are having their voices heard about the issues that impact them, it's really positive. And if the end result of this is, a wing of IATSE for VFX workers or the like, then I think that we've made a big step. Listen, the rest of Hollywood is extremely unionized. The directors, the producers, the writers. I'm a member of the Writers Guild, and I think it's been every day I see, that's how I get my health insurance. You know, it's like you see the benefits of it. And it just makes sense to me that this extremely integral piece of the machinery should also unionize, just as the rest of them have.
I totally agree. And it seems shocking. Like it says in this article multiple times, like you'll speak to like a camera operator and you'll tell them you're not unionized. And they're like, what the fuck?
What
like, how
the fuck? Yeah.
I think that I have to say, and look, people listen to the podcast. They know what we talk about. They know what we read. I have a copy of Uncanny X-Men 185 behind me, Storm without her powers. But I think there is a direct line here between the way that Marvel and DC, but let's talk about Marvel because this is what we're talking about, have always treated creators and the rights of the artists who have made this work for them. Direct line from that to how little they value the creators who are now making these movies for them. And I hope that with the current lawsuits with the heirs of some of the biggest superhero characters, including like the heirs of Steve Ditko for Spider-Man and the upcoming potential reversion of rights that lawsuit could have alongside this VFX union, I would love to see a shift and a change in that corporate culture that could finally maybe start to put the rights and the proper capital and ownership and also just compensation back in the hands of the people who make these stories possible, whether it's comic book creators or VFX artists, who nowadays are equally important to those stories.
Yeah, I actually do see them as significantly different issues. The work for hire creators who created Batman, Superman, the X-Men, etc., not getting their due, I think, is a very specific and sad issue that has been addressed in dribs and drabs. You know, Marvel and DC both give royalties now, etc. Like there is a small bonus paid. Sometimes, yeah,
let's say very minimal.
We hear that there is a bonus paid when a created character goes into a movie. You know, the VFX workers, while it is a creative job, are to me more like the grips and the lighting people in that they're doing a mechanical thing, not just like following a flight of fancy to be like, oh, I'm going to make this character's costume exactly the way that I want. Like they're following a set order of things that have kind of passed down from the creators. At the same time, they are just integral to the process. And I think that we're going to talk about the AI art class action lawsuit right after this. I think that broadly there is something that is not talked about enough when it comes to these kind of like tech-based worker issues, and it affects the consumers as well. And it's that things change so quickly in tech. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, the way that we make movies now with the volume and et cetera is completely different, even though like computer graphics have been around for 30 plus years, is completely different than they were making movies 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera. And so there is, I think, often an ease of disconnect between the older generation of producer, creator, whoever that has been working in the space and the younger people, more tech savvy people who are coming up. It's just the worlds are so different that they operate in that it's very easy and almost financially incentivized to just like not really know what they do.
Yeah. And that actually causes a big problem. That's one of the things that comes up time and time again in this conversation is if you have a director or a producer who doesn't really understand the nature of the work, then it's easy for them to come to you 3 weeks before the movie's meant to be done and say, hey, I need you to redo the ending, like completely. Right. And I don't really have a visualization for it. This just needs to happen. It's very, like you said, that disconnect makes it easy to push that work onto people without necessarily thinking about how much time or effort it takes. And I also think that, like you said, there is a lack of knowledge and education, maybe purposefully, but about how those changes are happening. I was incredibly shocked to find out that Victoria Alonso, who's done so much brilliant work at Marvel, I was very shocked to find out that she's the head of post-production space in that company. That is a job that I would assume you would have somebody who worked in post-production doing, so they could be that person between the two. You can be that middleman who makes sure that the directors know what is needed, and the VFX people know what is needed. So I think there's that disconnect is a huge problem. And hopefully a union would be able to at least bridge that a little bit.
I mean, use the leverage and the weight that they have, hopefully, for good, in order to have have the workers' issues heard, and certainly, not create a thing where people are working around the clock in order to make a movie or TV show happen. One of the people I work with, Peter Murrieta, who created Wizards of Waverly Place, he always says there's no such thing as a television emergency. I would say that the same thing is true for movies.
Yeah.
And while people, it's good to work hard, and sometimes you need to put in a 12-hour day. We get it.
But they're saying regular 18-hour days.
Yeah, but there should be no situation in which people are just grilling themselves in order to make a fucking Avengers movie come out. I love Avengers movies, but come on. Okay, the AI class action lawsuit. We've been talking about it. The internet has been talking about the leaps and bounds by which creative AI, whether it's ChatGPT in the written word or the various AI art engines, Stability AI, Stable Diffusion, etc., have been kind of reshaping the creative space. And now a selection of artists have filed a class action suit against the AI companies Midjourney, who make Midjourney, and Stability AI, who makes Stable Diffusion, as well as DeviantArt, who they allege allowed these AI engines to kind of scrape their platform of art without informing the artists who post there, have filed a class action lawsuit from a Polygon article from January 17th, written by Nicole Clark. Quote, the suit alleges that these companies violated the rights of millions of artists by using billions of internet images to train its AI art tool without the consent of artists, without compensating any of those artists. These companies benefit commercially and profit richly from the use of copyright images, the suit alleges. Quote, the harm to artists is not hypothetical, the suit says, noting that the works created by generative AI art are, quote, already sold on the internet, siphoning commissions from the artists themselves. We talked about this briefly. Yeah. I've been surprised that there haven't been more class action suits, but I think, this piece takes that on, saying that it's most of the experts, while kind of split on whether what Stability or Midjourney are doing are actually illegal, do agree that depending on how this class action suit goes, there will surely be others.
Yeah, and the good thing about class action lawsuit is anyone can just jump on once it's out there, And this is a big deal because there's actually these are high profile people. So I'd actually read a really great article written by Sarah Anderson, who makes the webcomic Sarah Scribbles, which if you don't immediately know it by name, you will immediately recognize it if you see it. And she'd written about how people had taken what were essentially her diary comics and put them into this AI and were already replicating them. And these are these are quite big name people. One of the other names on this is an illustrator who's done stuff for Marvel, the film studios, and for Wizards of the Coast. So I think that helps as well, having 3 high profile people who are willing to put their name to it. And the filing is wild. They found 40 pages of alleged, copyright infringements and stuff, and different ways that the AI was infringing on people's rights. So I'm very interested to see where this goes. I think this is good. I think that, as a lot of people have pointed out, this could be the moment when it goes from a Napster type thing to a Spotify. This could be that turning point where people find a way of doing it. I hope it ends up being more financially viable for artists than Spotify is. But I think this is probably an interesting thing that we should definitely be keeping our eyes on.
Yeah, I think that, who knows? There is some interesting conversation in a Verge piece written by James Vincent about this that kind of tries to dissect issues regarding fair use of this art and whether training an AI is fair use versus whether using that training to create content is fair use. I think that's really going to be where the rubber meets the road. Zooming out, because who knows how that's going to go. I think one of my concerns with this is that the AI art and the way it's trained, AI art and the text generation AIs, the way they're trained, it seems to bring us back to like an earlier form of wealth creation.
Yes.
That was based on, I get richer by taking your shit. Like, whatever criticisms we all have of capitalism and neoliberalism and the way it exploits the workers.
Feudalism. Like, I'm taking your shit.
Yeah. Post the mid 19th century, capitalism, the basic like thesis is like, okay, like you give us your time by working in the factory and you make a little bit more money so that you can buy some conveniences that make your life easier. Meanwhile, the rich get richer. Okay. The AI era is you have done all this really, really hard work and we're just going to take it and we're going to fucking take it. And that's how we're going to build the value of our company. And that is really troubling.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the most worrying thing. And I also think there's something that a lot of people seem to have missed in these conversations is like, Midjourney is scraping from billions of images or millions of images, whatever they say. And that makes it, that you can make the argument that makes it harder to compensate people or to, give people credit, right? But I have seen multiple examples of people who are using these generators that use this art and just feeding one person's art in, feeding 50 images of that person's art, and then just plagiarizing that person's art, but saying they created it. And so I think you're spot on. And I think there's numerous different issues with this. One of which is that it devalues the work of artists and not just like, it's really weird how all of this stuff is kind of tied in because people will be like, well, that VFX artist who is earning $17 an hour. Well, that's just, they're doing their job and that's what the job's valued at. But no, because when you do a job, you're really being paid for all the work that went into it or the time that you have to spend to do it or the rigmarole that it takes on your body. Like there's all these different things. And as an artist, when you do a commission, when you pay an artist $500 to commission you some beautiful portrait, you're really paying for not just the time that they spend to draw it, but all of the studying that they did, all the practice, all of that. And while some people argue that AI art democratizes art because then, anyone can just make a picture by writing a word on the internet, that's not really that simple. That's like a really nice idealistic viewpoint, and I love the idea of accessibility. But guess what? Art's already accessible. You just need a pencil, and a piece of paper.
I said this the previous time we talked about this, but it's essentially the way it's being used now. It is a wealth transfer from the working artists who do storyboards, who do the art for book covers, who do the art for album covers. We've already seen that happening. Yep. And transferring those monies that those artists would have earned and taking it at scale and transferring it to the value of these AI companies because of the work that they can make easier for the people who are producing various kinds of products. And I think that is, we need to grapple with the question of whether that's actually something we want to do, and hopefully this lawsuit will open the floodgates and we'll see some more, because I think, just some of the ways that these various companies have kind of like built their corporate structure, it's very clear that they want to insulate themselves from lawsuits. The way that they've targeted where to scrape art very clearly shows that they're targeting artists who don't have the resources. They're not
scraping Mickey Mouse.
We're not going to Disney.com and like they're very clearly avoiding big landmines, and that to me lets you know that they kind of understand that what they're doing is going to be objectionable to a great
they're creating
people.
Like a gray legal area where this was actually in that Verge piece, the James Vincent piece that you mentioned. that was written in November last year, and they actually say that part of the reason why they think there hasn't been any lawsuits is because it's so expensive. And that's what this class action lawsuit could potentially answer. And that's kind of why it's a bit of an out there. People expected it to be a corporation or someone with a lot of money who would be able to bring that first lawsuit. But this allows multiple people to be a part of it. And yeah, I'll be very interested. That law firm is very well thought of in these cases. And I saw them, one of the first people I saw who posted it said the lawsuits claimed back like $4 billion for people in similar class actions. So I'll be very interested to see where it goes. It's such a complex topic, but like you said, even between now and the last time we talked about it, Tor had to do an apology, the publisher, because they had bought a cover art that they thought was from a stock artist on a website, and it turned out it was generated by AI, but they'd already made the books and they couldn't afford to reprint them. So this is already taking money from artists' pockets, even in a most abstract way. Even if we're not talking about someone directly plagiarizing, this is already, like that lawsuit claims, taking money out of the pockets of artists. And like you said, it's a wealth transfer. I think that's a really great way to put it. And it's not the way that it's supposed to be. And I hope this lawsuit can open, like you said, open the floodgates, open the doors on a bigger conversation about the morals of this stuff.
Up next, we're going to be catching up on the first 4 episodes of The Bad Batch on Disney+. We're stepping out of the airlock to join forces with Clone Force 99, aka the Bad Batch, those genetic mutants that we all love so much. For more action and thrills in Season 2, note for listeners, unlike The Last of Us, we won't be covering the Bad Batch week to week, but we'll be dropping in mostly on our second episode of the week, our Friday episode. The Bad Batch, created by Dave Filoni, of course. Starring D. Bradley Baker as the Bad Batch, all of them. That's right, all of them. Great booking by D. Bradley Baker, Hunter Record Tech Crosshair, and of course, Echo. Michelle Ang as Omega. That must be so crazy to do all these like voices.
I know. Especially now it's like a 2-season long show. This is no longer like a 4-episode arc, as it was supposed to be.
I gotta say, Season 2 of The Bad Batch opens really, really strong.
Yeah.
We were talking about this. Really, really strong. But we're going to focus on the last 2 episodes, starting with episode 3, The Solitary Clone, and then episode 4, Faster, which is really just an action episode, but a really great action episode. Shouts to Tech. Good driving. Starting with episode 3, The Solitary Clone, we see an Imperial shuttle arrive on Desix, which is a farming world, and it's carrying the Imperial governor of the planet, plus a squadron of clone troopers in their new early stormtrooper armor. They are met by Tawny Ames, who is, the native governor of this planet. The Imperial governor, Groton, is basically here to bring Desix, which was a separatist world, a separatist holdout, into the Empire. And Ames is like, no, we fought on the side of the separatists against the Republic. We want to be independent. We fought for that independence. We earned it. And there's a reason we haven't joined the Empire, and that's because we don't fucking wanna. And then she calls out her army of battle droids who... have they ever won a battle? Anyway, she calls out her army of battle droids. Optimistic. She's feeling good about it, and the battle droids eject the Imperials from the planet with a message that's essentially like, listen, don't come back and don't try it. On Coruscant, Vice Admiral Rampart summons Crosshair from the mess hall. Crosshair, there's a really nice detailing here where we see how different Crosshair is from the rest of the Imperial clones. First of all, he wears the black armor. Second of all, nobody wants to eat with him.
Yeah, I was going to say, these mess hall scenes for so long in Star Wars have been like this, in Star Wars animation, have been this space of like camaraderie where we get to see the way the clones interact. So it's really, really stark and striking that we see Crosshair here and alone. No brothers, no clones. This is just him. And yeah, it's really good, smart storytelling.
So Rampart calls Crosshair to his office and he says, listen, I'm sending you to Desix. Your mission is, by hook or by crook, you bring down Tawny Ames, the governor, so that we can replace her with our governor, Governor Groton. Crosshair then goes to meet our old friend Commander Cody. And what a delight. What a delight to see our good friend Commander Cody. It's maybe not so great that he's still working for the bad guys, although it's very clear that he feels a type of way about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is really cool. I mean, I wasn't expecting this. Maybe I missed it in the trailers, but this is like our first canon Commander Cody appearance since like Revenge of the Sith. Like, this is really cool. This is what this episode does so well and what this show does so well. But like you say, I was like, still there. But then I was very interested by this choice of, like you said, to use him as kind of this in to where the clones are when it comes to Order 66.
That is such an interesting part of this conversation. And I think kind of like this series is very Clone Wars-esque, obviously, because of the subject matter and the period that we're working in, but also in the sense that you can feel a kind of like overarching thematic structure for a season, and then we'll drop in and out of that with different bottle episodes, like faster, like different things. So it's in the same way the Clone Wars would kind of like move in crab-like fashion towards, in an arc from the beginning of a season towards the end of a season, but also would drop out and have like, bottle episodes for Jar Jar Binks or whatever. I think for me, the most interesting part of Bad Batch is this idea of, one, where do the clones find themselves? What place do they have, both the Bad Batch, on their own, and then the Imperial clones, what place do they have in the Empire? They're about to be replaced by stormtroopers, though they don't know it. And on top of that, how do they feel about Order 66? How do they actually feel about it? And delving into that is really, really fascinating. So Crosshair meets Commander Cody. Cody says, "Oh yeah, the Bad Batch. Not surprised at all that you guys went rogue. In fact, isn't that why you were kind of like your whole purpose was kind of like go rogue, isn't it? Like, and he notes that clones have been discussing in small groups amongst themselves Order 66, what it meant, whether it was right. Were the Jedi really traitors to the Republic? Unclear. Crosshair, however, and it remains to be seen how deep this belief goes, but he is a believer. He is a true fucking believer.
In this moment,
Crosshair
he's looking at Commander Cody like Commander Cody is the threat. He's like, you don't understand. Because the secret of Crosshair's mission is like, they're going on a diplomatic mission, but we know from Rampart that really he's sent Crosshair for a reason.
And I think that's another thing that's so interesting about this show is the way it takes Star Wars themes and shoots them through the lens of these clones. The main theme being here, how far to the dark side can you go before being pulled back, before it's too late? And I think, you can't... down to his voice and everything, the way he acts, like you can't help but every time he's on the screen wonder, what would it take for Crosshair to go, okay, this is too much.
Yeah.
Now it's too much. Back on Desix, Tawny Ames knows the Imperial diplomats are not there to negotiate. She understands. She gets the Empire, maybe, one of the earliest ones to kind of see the truth about what the Empire is. She says that, and this is a really cool wrinkle, that Dooku, who was really an idealist, like if you look at his history, was a real idealist. That Dooku at some point lost faith and understood that the Empire would be the end result of what was happening between the Separatists and the Republic and the kind of machinations that Emperor Palpatine was putting in place. She sends her droids and tanks against the Imperial ship. It crashes, but of course, Cody and Crosshair are not so easily killed, and both of them survive along with a handful of clones. We get a really cool action scene where Crosshair snipes an entire fucking tank through the barrel. And then they work together to fight their way into Ames's fortress. Crosshair and Cody just kind of like fight their way to a top of a tower where Ames is protected by droids, and she's holding Governor Groton hostage there. Ames then insists that, hey, Desix is independent again, like we've been for many years. We're fighting a defensive campaign against the Empire. We're not attacking the Empire. You're attacking us. So, like, what the fuck? Cody then, delivers the company line about the Empire. Hey, the Empire's just here to bring order after the chaos of the Clone Wars. We're here to just bring peace, unity. Ames is like, okay, well, Desix tried years ago to negotiate a peace deal with the Empire, but the Empire was not interested, not even a little bit. They want everything.
Yeah.
They don't want a negotiated peace. Cody is trying to talk Ames down. He vaguely threatens her, saying that, like, hey, if you release Groton, you should do it for the good of your people, which is a very imperial kind of like, hey, what if we just kill everybody? What about that? So she does. And then Governor Groton immediately is like, hey, Commander Cody, kill Tawny Ames. Commander Cody's a good guy. And so he hesitates, but then Crosshair just fucking does it. And this is where I say to you, he's gone too far, has it? I think he's gone too far at that point.
It's Dooku killing Yaddle.
Yeah,
it's Mace Windu.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cold-blooded murder. I think it's an order, but like, I think he's gone to, like, do you think that Crosshair can come back from this?
I think the nature of this story and the story of the Bad Batch in particular is to explore the concept that kind of nature versus nurture concept, but also the idea that even if you have done terrible things under the guise of following orders, you can become a better person and make right. I do think that in what is essentially a child's TV show, if you think about the way this is probably marketed within Disney, as much as I think this is brilliant adult storytelling, I do think that once you murder someone in cold blood, you probably aren't. You're probably not going to have like a full redemption arc. Like, this is like a gangster style, like a mafia hit. Like, he does it. I think this is I wanted more Crosshair and I wanted to see where he was at. I find the story very interesting. I think we'll be in a position where Crosshair will have the chance to die to do something that's right. I think that sadly is the only redemption that is left for him at this point. And I was so interested by how dark they went with this episode.
Very, very dark.
The first two episodes are really great, and they set them in these beautiful, exotic,
tropical beaches.
Yeah. And there's a lightness to it, even when you're dealing with those same big questions.
Fun, yeah,
and those same big questions that have always made, in my opinion, the animated show so good, which is that how do other people exist in this huge space that aren't Skywalkers? What happens if you're created to be a killer? Like, how do you break out of that? What do you mean? What does it mean to have agency? In this case, they just went so... This is going to be one of those... There's a lot of episodes in Clone Wars, I think, and Rebels as well, where people go, oh, you've got to watch this episode. And I feel like this is going to be one of those episodes. It appears to be an action episode on the surface, but it really has this kind of deeper depth in what it means for Crosshairs, this kind of uncrossable line, no pun intended. But also, it has like lots of Easter eggs. There's like, the TK troopers, they look kind of like Ralph McQuarrie's original designs. You have that reference that you mentioned about Ames talking about going to the Republic, and that was kind of direct reference to an episode of Clone Wars. So it's this really great mix of that kind of deep emotional storytelling that Filoni does, but with that fun kind of Star Wars fan service that makes this show so exciting.
You mentioned the darkness. Here is some dark shit. What do you do with Tawny Ames, the late governor of Desic's body? Groton is like, put her body in the square, let it be a warning to the rest. And now they let that moment, I think, smartly play on Cody's face, and you really see Cody doubt. At this moment, doubt. And really, not even doubt, but like know that he's... At that point, you're on the wrong side. Yeah. When you just murdered somebody who surrendered.
It's the I'll be the bad guys moment.
That is the moment. Cody then has a private moment with Crosshair and asks, hey, do you think we're doing the right thing? Which is a weird question to ask someone who just murdered someone in cold blood. But asks, and, he... there's some discussion about the battle droids and what they do and how their role is very similar, and that they go out and they fight the war that they are tasked with fighting, just following orders, but saying that in a different way. And then Cody very, very wisely says, here's the difference. The droids don't have any free will. They do what they're programmed to do. They fight who they're programmed to fight, where they're programmed to fight it. We can make the choice about whether or not, say, murdering a gaggle of younglings is right or wrong, depending on the justification. We can weigh those things and make our own decision, and should not we do that? Crosshair looks at Cody with very clear suspicion. Yeah. I mean, like, the vibe I got from Crosshair was like, I'm going to have to kill you.
Yeah, which I think is very interesting, because I feel like the reason Cody asked him that is I almost feel like he was trying to scope it out. Like, he was like, does he realize what he's done is wrong? Like, is this someone who just had the same realization that I did? Is this an ally in maybe questioning? But he learns that it's actually the opposite for Crosshair, that for whatever reason, he is fully committed to this Imperial mission, and he will do the worst, most horrific things if he thinks that they are necessary.
There's also something really fascinating about the idea of, here are all these clones. They have their identity, at least initially, was their numbers. Very small differences in the way that they are their identity that's been created for them. But we see here through the course of this story, and this is really one of the deepest questions of the Bad Batch in general, is even if you are a complete genetic recreation of another person, you can have a difference of opinion with that person. And that's really interesting here. I also felt like maybe Cody is kind of like, doesn't really is trying to get an idea of where Clone Force 99, the rest of them, are landing with this. Like, trying to use Crosshair as kind of a lens to kind of see where they might be. Yeah. In that very clonesy way of like trying to find out, okay, like, well, what are the rest of your batch think about this? Later on, Crosshair is laying in his bunk. He's lost in thought. He goes to mess again. Again, these wonderful moments that kind of like heighten the isolation of Crosshair. Rampart calls him again. Rampart has another mission for him. Why not Cody? He asks. Well, Commander Cody has gone AWOL.
Dun, dun, dun!
Dun, dun! Which
I love this, because I actually think it's a huge, well done bait and switch, because, like, you think this is the start of understanding where Crosshair's journey is going to go, and it is, but I think the real big returning character here is Commander Cody, and I think that this hints that we will see Commander Cody on a redemptive arc of his own that will be far more heroic and easy to swallow than trying to do that for Crosshair, who has committed this horrific wrong right in public view.
All right, let's talk about episode 4, Faster, which is really just a fun Clones War era bottle episode. Echo and Hunter are off doing a thing. They're not available. So our good friend, the gangster Sid, brings in the rest, Omega, Wrecker, and Tech, as like her bodyguards to watch her back, because she's got to, do some gambling on this version of pod racing, which, I mean, who doesn't fucking love pod racing?
Yeah, pod racing is so fun.
We get to meet her driver, Teo, who is a kind of very, very flashy and arrogant droid voiced by Ben Schwartz, who got to double dip in the Star Wars universe. Not only did Ben get to be BB-8, but now gets to be Teo.
I know, I love this. Just like your go-to, this is the go-to droid man now.
There are various wrinkles, and Teo cannot continue because of a crash. So guess what? Our good friend Tech needs to pilot the craft, and Tech uses his, strategic mindset and the information about the track delivered to him by Omega to kind of like master the track. It culminates in a wonderful, like, Luke, your targeting system is turned off. Is there anything wrong moment? where he takes all the energy from like his weapons and puts it like in the rest of the ship, and then like makes a jump that nobody thinks he can make, and then he wins. And Sid is absolutely relieved and is wondering, God, how long can I keep escaping like this with the use of these clones? And we also get a nice kind of like gesture at whether Sid is trying to be a better person.
Yes, it definitely. It seems like Omega kind of making this deal so that Sid can be safe. That kind of gives Sid the little nudge to kind of be like, oh, maybe I need to kind of be. There's a lot of moral complexity to the characters in this series, and Sid is definitely leaning into that area of like, oh, maybe I could be inspired to do better things and be better by these people who are around me. And this is just, like you said, you love pod racing, you love swoop racing, everyone's favorite shit from the Knights of the Old Republic. Like, this is a really fun, kind of almost like silly kind of breather after the bleakness that we saw. And I also
extreme bleakness.
I think it's actually like, it kind of makes the last episode even sadder because you get to see the camaraderie and like friendship and trust that the rest of the crew have, while Crosshair is kind of living this isolated killer life.
When do they? It feels like something you save for the penultimate episode and the finale, but they have to cross paths again.
I mean,
sorry.
What do you think
right?
they do? I mean, what do you think the like? Will Crosshair be sent to kill them? Is that what it's going to be? Like, I feel like that seems like the ultimate kind of poetic, maybe specifically to kill Omega.
Yeah, I think that the Bad Batch, as set up in the first 2 episodes, are going to make the decision that, okay, we're doing our own kind of independent thing, scuttling across the galaxy in the Outer Rim, doing jobs for Sid, doing little other jobs here. But what we really need to do, which is something they grappled with in the first 2 episodes, is get involved in this fight such that it exists. Get involved in this fight against the Empire. And I think they're going to go do some sort of heisty job, and Crosshair is going to be there with his clone troopers to meet them and try and take them down.
Yeah, and I think that my prediction is that Commander Cody will kind of be alongside the Bad Batch at that point. I think that will
be fucking...
Yeah, and you know
that will be fucking great.
You actually called this because you'd said you felt like this season was going to be... Or something you'd really like to see that you thought could happen would be like, how does the Bad Batch become involved with the rebellion? And that is from the very, like you said, the very first episode, second episode. That is a big theme. I mean, they even have the repainted suits with like the red, which the red hints towards the Rebel Alliance. So we're seeing that move. I think by the end, we could see them fully embracing the rebellion. Also, I mean, that first season when I was rewatching it for the pod, like, there are so many huge cameos, not less that huge like opening episode retcon opening, which I just loved, which kind of changes the fate of a really famous character. But I would be very interested to see who we're going to see them come up against from other Star Wars stories. I feel like they're keeping it intimate at the moment with these characters that we know who are so intrinsically connected. But I feel like that penultimate episode kind of showdown could take place in a space where the rebellion is already forming, where we could see some familiar faces.
One more question. There was a Twi'lek, green Twi'lek in the crowd of the pod race, and I mean, Hera has already shown up in the Bad Batch season 1. Was she just like in the crowd?
Oh my God, I would love that.
Race?
She was just chilling. She's like, I need to see how things go for Tech. Like, I mean, I love Hera. I feel like they're having a lot of fun with these like recognizable alien life forms, kind of like what we talked about in The Mandalorian, where they want you to look at them and be like, oh, is that character the character I think it is? I mean, I'm always for more Hera, more anyone from Rebels.
My Star Wars wife.
I want to see it.
We'll be checking in on the Bad Batch intermittently in the coming weeks. Up next, a very exciting Nerd Out.
So, in today's Nerd Out, where you tell us what you love and why, or a theory that you would like to share, Rodney, listen to us. I've been saying on these episodes that you can send in a theory. I've been saying, send it in. Make it tinfoily. Make it as wild as me and Jason would make it. And you know what? Rodney actually came up with an incredibly logical pitch. I'm very impressed by it. I'm actually surprised this hadn't come up on our list. So, this is for Marvel's upcoming Secret Invasion series, and it is one of the questions that we and our listeners have been asking the most, which is, who is going to be a Skrull? Jason, why don't you read the theory? It's a pretty good one.
Sure. This is from Rodney. Hi there. Never have sent in a question before, but listening to this week's speculation about who could be a Skrull in the MCU, I'm flabbergasted.
Perfect word.
No one has theorized the one that seems like a no-brainer, Sharon Carter. She's now the power broker in Madripoor making shady deals. She's got to be one. Thanks for the fun pod. Always excited to hear you both every week. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you for these thoughts. Yes.
I mean, it makes so much sense. Look, Sharon Carter.
It makes too much sense.
I'm not like the world's number one like Agent 13 fan. That vision of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not like something that gets me so excited. But I will say, I did not believe that Sharon Carter was essentially an upset ex-girlfriend of Steve Rogers.
I didn't buy it either.
I was like, what? Like you're mad about like that the Avengers didn't help you. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. No, I love this. It makes so much sense. I really like the idea that this would be an absolutely different kind of power base for a Skrull to have. It would be a Skrull with millions of dollars. It would be a Skrull with contacts in the shadiest place in the Marvel universe where every criminal knows to come. It would also, this is a bit tinfoily, but Power Broker can give people powers. We know that the Skrulls and the Super Skrulls can replicate, well, the Super Skrulls specifically, they can replicate a power. Maybe there's something there, some kind of Skrull technology that would be allowing Sharon to give those powers. I'm very interested in this theory, Rodney. She's on the list now.
I'll go further. I think it makes a lot of sense from a strategic point of view if you're the Skrulls. What do the Skrulls want to do? They want to take over, but first, they want to do so covertly. Why? Mm-hmm. One, because they're Skrulls and they're shapeshifters. That's just the nature of the thing. Secondarily, it's because Earth is really, really strong. They fought off Thanos. They fought off multiple different kinds of incursions from gods, from aliens, etc. They have heroes that are really, really powerful. They have a defense, a kind of structure that is, pretty powerful on its own. They need to weaken all of that from the inside. So how do you do that? You weaken trust in powered people by giving losers and weirdos and criminals and people who don't deserve it powers. Anybody who can pay for it, you give them powers. And by the way, those powers aren't even that good. They're just like
immaculate.
Yeah.
This theory is so good, Jason.
And so now you're creating this kind of corrosive misinformation, creating this environment in which people who used to look up to Tony Stark, to the Hulk, to Captain America are now like, is this really a good thing? That
like there was like 6 of them before, but now it's anyone who has powers.
Now it's anybody. And that is all working towards what the Skrulls want to do, which is create this chaos, this kind of weakening of the social fabric so that they can sneak in there and take control. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I love this, and I think that would do so much to destabilize the MCU as we know it, and it would explain that choice to me. Plus, I would love to see a space where you have like this Skrull power broker Sharon Carter involved with this like Thunderbolts-esque team that Val is putting together. There could just be so many maniacal evil things occurring in a way that we haven't really seen. You know, one of the classic superhero stories that kind of classic to the point where we rag on it when we see it, like, you know, oh no, Spider-Man, there's an evil Spider-Man and he's doing stuff. It must be Spider-Man's turned evil, or Batman, and it's just someone dressed up as them. We haven't gotten to see that in the MCU because of the nature of how these stories are told and the huge scope. So the idea that we'll get to see this inversion of what a superhero can be is actually really exciting on a narrative level and as a fan, and leans into some of the most fun storytelling tropes of comics. But like you said, this again, I'm sorry, it's going back there. The X-Men, this sets up that distrust and suspicion and fear that we would need. And that, interestingly as well, could be something that in the long term could see the Skrulls. That could be something that could actually see the Skrulls get defeated or destabilized themselves, because if they are in those roles, it's going to be much harder for them to continue to be in power as people stop to trust them. But if the Skrulls revealed themselves in different forms or as Skrulls and said, hey, these superheroes are terrible, we'll stop them, then you're in a really interesting place where they can take even more power.
It's a great one. Rodney, you killed it.
Thank you, Rodney. If you have any theories or passions you want to share, like Rodney, hit us up at xray@crooked.com. Instructions, as always, in the show notes.
That's it for us, Rosie. Plugs. Any plugs?
You can find me, Rosie Marks, at Instagram and Letterboxd. I have a website, rosieknight.com, where you can read all of my articles, which are archived on Authory. You can read some of my comic books there. Maybe I'll be able to tell you something about my top secret project coming soon, but it's going, that's for sure. Oliver's artwork is looking beautiful, as always. Yeah, and just listen to X-Ray Vision. You know where we are. You hear us now 2 times a week talking about all this cool stuff.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Network with a 3 in the work. Reach out to me there. Catch the next episode on Wednesday, January 25th with more of The Last of Us. We're going to be doing a double Last of Us next week, covering the show on our Wednesday episode, and then our second installment of our coverage of the video game in our Friday episode. And remember, 2 episodes a week. 2 episodes a week. We're bringing you 2. That's 2 episodes a week. 2 episodes a week. Twice the tinfoil hat theories. Twice the deep dives. Twice the stuff. We're doubling it, folks.
And so to make sure you get the double stuff, you've got to subscribe to the show on YouTube. Follow XRV Pod on Twitter. And check out our Discord, where we're always hanging out, meet and hang out with a ton of amazing fans and listeners. And me and Jason will be in there. I'm really excited to chat in the Discord about The Last of Us when we watch it. That live watch was really great.
Really, really fun. 5-star ratings. We need them. We got to have them. You have them. You got to give them to us. Here's one from Doris Henrique. Amazing. 5 stars. Quick and to the point, and that's what we love too. Thank you, Doris Henrique. See you next time.